What's the latest scam that actually is targeting young professionals instead of seniors? We're going to talk about what that is and how you can make sure to identify it and avoid it should it come your way. Plus, we'll talk about some of the factors that are driving the longer-term trend that we've seen evolving over the course of the past decade of folks retiring at an earlier, or should I say at a later age than what they used to retire at. We're going to talk about some of the factors. Some of them, of course, are going to be obvious, life expectancy, things like that. But more importantly, we'll talk about some of the things that you can do to sort of prepare for that transition. So welcome to the program. This, of course, is Dollars and Cents, Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you on a host of stations throughout the Central Florida region. Also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast platform of choice. My name, of course, Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where we've got a team of great folks who also happen to be certified financial fiduciaries that stand ready to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So I guess it would be remiss if we didn't wish everybody an early happy Halloween. Happy Halloween. Happy Halloween. I guess we should also maybe play the same scary music when it comes to the rush to the end of the year, right? If tomorrow is Halloween, then that means that the day after that is the 1st of November, 2 months left in the year, and we are accelerating dramatically then the notion of 2023. Also, of course, during the course of the last couple of months of the year, it usually is a time where you see maximum consumer spending because of the holidays and holiday shopping. Well, against that backdrop, we've got the data that came out last week in terms of the economy. Now, the headline number appeared to be certainly better than the prior two quarters. For the third quarter of this year, the economy, as measured by the GDP, actually grew a total of 2.6%. So headline number, okay, that's good. Certainly an improvement from the second quarter and the first quarter where there wasn't growth. It was, in fact, a contraction, a negative number. But as you start to look a little bit deeper into the data, and it's that deeper dive in the data that obviously the markets are really kind of focusing on, you start to see where consumer spending is certainly less, going from a total percentage of about 2.1% growth to 0.5% growth in the second quarter, 2.1 in the first quarter, 0.5 in the second, and now a relatively anemic 0.1% in the third quarter. So that's a trend that a lot of folks are looking at and saying, well, wait a minute, the consumer seems to be spending less. And the reason, of course, that the consumer and business spending sort of goes into that category, the reason that that's an important component, if you will, of the overall economy is that's the biggest piece, right? Consumer and business spending amount to about 70% of that entire economic number. So those are sort of the mixed bag of economic data that came out this past week. If you're looking at other little pieces of that, you see that home sales hit their longest streak of declines in about 15 years. Stocks, of course, on pace for the worst year since 2008. Consumer sentiment near these record lows that we haven't seen since 2008. So certainly, as you kind of look at the data, the market, as we know, has sort of priced that in, right? When the market's down about 25% at one point back in September, that was its decline, and so that's what the market is sort of reacting to. The rest of the story if you will. Also, the backdrop this past week, earnings season. So you saw a lot of tech companies and a lot of banks, a lot of large companies sort of announce their earnings. In particular, obviously, if you're a technology company, higher interest rates tend to be a little bit of a drag. So couple that with reduced business spending. Again, that piece of the economic data that has a lot of folks concerned is that business spending then gets reflected, particularly in the revenue of companies like Facebook, Google. Facebook in particular this past week had a pretty tough week after it had its earnings announcement. Google, a fifth consecutive quarter of slowing sales growth. So all of those things are starting to sort of impact. And again, that's what the market is pricing in. We always talk about the market being sort of forward-looking, and certainly when you start to look at some of these numbers on the consumer spending side, that explains a lot of what is going on in terms of the overall economy and, for that matter, what's going on in the market. So, and I think at the end of the day, it sort of underscores the importance among different types of companies. Certainly large tech had a pretty tough week this past week, but there's certainly some big differences. If you're looking at the performance of a diversified portfolio, you should see certain pieces of that portfolio that over the course of the past year are down that requisite sort of 25% in terms of the overall market. Large growth down more than that, typically around 30%. But there should also be, on the other hand, other parts of the portfolio that are only down maybe single digits, maybe 10%, somewhere in that neck of the woods. So if you're looking at your portfolio, you really want to take a moment and look. Certainly it's hard not to get hung up on the top line number, because let's face it, at the end of the day, it's been a very hard year for the market. So you're looking at your top line number and you're saying, oh my goodness, so much value has been eroded because of this market decline. I don't have the money in my account that I had at the beginning of the year. And that's certainly true, particularly if you've got any kind of investment portfolio these days. But what we really encourage people to do is sort of look at each of the individual positions, right? And if you're doing that, then you should see some stuff that's maybe down only 10% over the past year versus other stuff where, okay, fine, it's down 30%. I guess that's the point of making sure that you have a diversified portfolio. And I guess that comes particularly into the forefront if you are retired, right? If you're retired and taking income out of your portfolio, then you really need to be thinking about, okay, if I'm getting income, I need to make sure that I'm taking it out of the stuff that is down less. So what you should be doing is, if you're set up the traditional way to receive income, you should be sort of taking that proportionally across the different investments that you have. Nowadays, though, it would be smarter to look at which of those investments are down less and ultimately concentrate where you're getting the income from for probably the next 6 to 12 months out of those investments that are down less. That's one way to kind of help to weather the storm a little bit, because you don't want to be taking money out of stuff that's down a lot more than stuff that is down not as much. So we'll continue that thought after these messages here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. On the program, we're talking about some of the ways that if you are retired, some of the things you might want to be considering now, particularly if you're drawing income out of your investment portfolio. Look, if you're following some of the fundamental investing concepts that we've been talking about for over 30 years on this program, you know that you should be diversified, right? So that means that when you look at your portfolio, even in today's tough market, there should be some positions that are maybe only down like 10% over the past year versus some that might be down north of 30. And so if you're taking income, right, typically you would do that sort of proportionally, right, across all of the different positions. But now, and perhaps for the next 6 to 12 months, to sort of weather through this market decline, then you probably want to take and reshuffle that income so that it is coming out of the stuff that is not down as much. Why? Because when you take money out of something that is down more, then you're taking more shares to get the same amount of dollars. So certainly an important concept there in terms of being retired and taking income out of your portfolio to sort of shift that to take out of those funds that are down the least. And the reality is, if you've sort of followed some of the things that we've talked about at length on this program over the years, then you know that rebalancing and things like that represents a real opportunity to help rebalance the account, trim the profit, and in essence, sort of move money out of what has been doing well over to stuff that might not have been doing as well. Now, we were talking a lot about that as a theme for last year, because a great time to rebalance, of course, is when the markets are better. Well, if you did that last year and you rebalance and you trim some profit, put it off to the side into something much more conservative, or simply moved a little bit out of large growth and over to large value, large dividend, then that rebalance would have been nicely rewarded because that side of the equation is down much less. The large dividend types of areas of the market are in fact down much less than the large growth. So once again, so important to remember those investment fundamentals. It may seem counterintuitive in terms of why would I take money out of stuff that's doing really well and put it in stuff that isn't doing as well right now. The reality is that we all know that sort of there's a normal rotation, if you will, in terms of the types of companies and the sectors that do well at different points in time. So certainly the notion of rebalancing, which is something that I think people sort of forget when things are going well. They sort of forget to do that, but you certainly want to do that. And hopefully, based upon some of the things that we were talking about in the program at length last year, then you were able to do that. And if you did, then now you've got some opportunity to take that income that you're getting in retirement out of those investments that are down less. So remember the fundamentals. It always comes back to that, right? Being diversified, and in that respect, taking income out of what is down less, rebalancing intentionally, and of course, being consistent on that strategy. Those are the ways in which you achieve investment results over time. Jumping in, jumping out, looking for the next hot thing. We wish you all the luck in the world with that approach, because history tells us that it doesn't really achieve a whole lot of investment success. So anyway, speaking of some of the things that can harm you beyond just the economy and those kinds of things, another thing that is becoming more and more prevalent are scams that we've certainly over the years talked a lot about. Some of the scams that target seniors, the most vulnerable part of the population, often targets for scammers across the board. Well, in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about one new scam that is actually intentionally designed to take money from folks that are young professionals. So that's an important little twist in terms of the normal piece, because it doesn't mean that, oh, I'm young, I don't have to worry about someone trying to scam me. That's my grandmother's problem kind of thing. The reality is that we're seeing a lot of these scams sort of percolate throughout all generations. And one in particular has really become more prevalent, and we're going to talk about that next here on the program. So welcome back into Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. One of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast station of choice. Have any problems finding our channels on any of those platforms, including our YouTube channel as well? Simply go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. Upper right-hand corner has a bunch of icons. Click on the one that looks most familiar to you, and you will get instantly connected to our channel on that particular platform. My name, of course, Joel Garris, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So the scam that we're talking about that has become more and more popular is actually referred to as pig butchering. Okay, I don't make this up. Here's how it works. The con is that you engage in a business or an account or something that ultimately starts to show a lot of gain. And then, and oftentimes it's with crypto or digital currency or whatever the case may be, but then, so these folks encourage you to open up accounts together with them, and all of a sudden it starts showing gains, and then you say, well, that's great, that's a lot of money, and that's fantastic, and then you add more money into that account, and the game keeps going and keeps going, so that ultimately the account and the amount of dollars that you wind up putting into it are far and away much larger than sort of your typical scam. And once that has all happened and you've added money into the account over a period of time, boom, the account gets closed and the con artist runs off with your money. Total losses last year to this type of scam, $429 million, according to the FBI. Average loss, about $300,000. So this is not your, send $500 to me, send $1,000, those typical scams that are all over the place. That's why this type of scam is known particularly as pig butchering, because it's got a much higher amount of total loss. So how does it work, and how do you avoid that? Well, it basically plays on basic human decency, right? The impulse to help someone who inadvertently, not inadvertently, remember, this is a professional, but inadvertently sends you a text or sends you a message that says, hey, are we meeting tomorrow? Or, hey, is this Bob? Or, just something that tries to catch your eye and kind of alludes to the fact that, oh, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to text you. I meant to text somebody else. And then from there, that mistaken text, once you respond to it, then you're going to find that a conversation is going to get started pretty quickly. And that's the part of the con, if you will, that helps to bring you into a relationship, quote unquote, with this person that chances are they're sitting on another continent and doing this to a bunch of people at the same time, because these are professionals and these are professional criminal organizations that do this. So when you get a text that is from somebody that you do not know, do not respond. Don't even, and I understand that it's basic human nature to try and be helpful. If someone says, hey, are we meeting tomorrow for lunch? And it's not anybody, you say, oh, I think you have the wrong number. Don't even do that, because once you say you don't have the wrong number, then you're going to see that it very quickly engages into a back and forth conversation. And then that happens over a period of time. And then lo and behold, that's how they build confidence. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden you're opening up an account because they've got a great business idea. And then you add more money to that account as that account continues to grow by the account having shown fake gains. And then all of a sudden the account gets closed and the person runs off with the money. So just pay particular attention to this one. It happens all the time. I get them. I'm sure you get them. These texts that are coming from folks that pretend that they've made a mistake, but they really haven't. Bottom line, do not respond. Do not strike up a conversation. Do not engage. Stay alert for those types of texts. And bottom line, you just got to ignore them. With that, we will take a break and continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents with your host, Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. Folks are retiring later in life. There's an actual sort of trend that has been happening over the course of the past 20 or 30 years where the average age of retirement has been increasing. So we wanted to, in this part of the program, talk about some of the factors that are driving this trend and how you can, in fact, be prepared for sort of this change in trend of folks retiring at later ages. So welcome to the program. This, of course, is Dollars and Cents. If you missed any part of the first half of the program, well, the good news is that we're a podcast as well. So you can listen to it anytime you want, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I don't encourage that much listening, because if you do, then you're kind of wasting time when you could be doing other things. But if you give us a listen, then you might learn a little something about finances and how better to manage your overall financial life. That, after all, is what the program's been doing for over 30 years now as one of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, along with a top 25 financial planning podcast. My name, of course, Joel Garris, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we've got a team of great people, also happen to be certified financial fiduciaries as well. That's pretty important, that are standing by to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. Maybe now, particularly during a tough year, it might be a good idea. I know a lot of people have a tendency to say, well, I don't really want to look at things, don't really want to engage, but it might not be a bad idea to just have a second opinion on how whatever your current plan is. And of course, as you know, all of our consultations at the office are free of charge. So if you're looking for a second opinion, we can certainly visit with folks and give some thoughts as to whether they are on the right path or not. Probably important to do that every now and then, don't you think? Anyway, Americans today are retiring 3 or 4 years later in life than they did 3 decades ago. And that is sort of reversing a trend that actually had lasted for more than a century, where the average age of retirement was actually kind of sliding downward. According to a Gallup study between 1991 and 2022, so over the course of the past 30-odd years, the average age for retirement has in fact been going up from an average of 57 years to 61. Other studies sort of confirm sort of that statistics that over the past 30 years or so, and COVID sort of being the exception over the course of the past couple of years, that the age of retiring has in fact increased, which has reversed the prior trend that had been going on for the prior 50-odd years of the average age of retirement decreasing. So what's some of the factors that is involved that explains how all of that recent trend is sort of reversing that trend of people retiring earlier in life to now retiring later in life? And some of this stuff should be relatively self-explanatory, but we also want to get to the solutions of how you can better prepare for that change, if you will. And perhaps the biggest one that we think has driven a lot of this trend to retiring a little bit later in life is Social Security. And in the 1980s, they increased the full retirement age from 65 to 67. Today, if you're born in 1960 and you take your Social Security at 62 instead of 67, it's a loss of 30% because they increased that full retirement age. Back when the retirement age was 65 for Social Security, well, then if you went at 62, then it wasn't as big of a reduction off of your full retirement amount. Today, because they've pushed out the full retirement age to 67, and the reality is then it is a much greater reduction than what you previously experienced. So that's one of the reasons why you folks would say, okay, well, maybe I'm going to work a little bit longer as a result of that shift. Of course, all of these notions of retiring at a later age all come back to life expectancy. The reality is people are living longer, and certainly that means that they're able to work longer than what they might otherwise been able to do. But there's also some structural things that have happened. And the biggest structural thing that's happened probably goes back to Social Security and the notion of shifting up that full retirement age to from 65 to 67. Other things that have happened inside the Social Security plan in the 70s, they increased the benefits if you're retiring after your full retirement age. The reality is that the majority of folks, 57%, still take Social Security before their full retirement age. So I think the bottom line on that is that make sure you understand what your full retirement age is. Again, born after 1960, it's 67. Born before that, it's a little bit less than that. But it's important to know what that full retirement age is, because then that's going to impact how much of your Social Security or how much, if any, your Social Security is going to get reduced, because it's pegged off of that full retirement age. So obviously that structural change inside of Social Security as it relates to the full retirement age certainly helped to shift the trend or reverse the trend. Now people retiring a little bit later. Similarly, the advent of the 401k, right? Again, these are some of the structural changes that kind of have pushed this trend of folks retiring a little bit later. Once you shift away from a pension and go to a 401k, then how the market is doing and things like that becomes much more important. And certainly over the course of the past generation, we've sort of seen that shift from a defined benefit, a pension plan, over to more of a defined contribution plan. The defined benefit plan, obviously, it's based upon things like your salary and your years of service, and then that calculates out to a specific dollar amount that you're guaranteed to get each and every month. That's the notion of a traditional pension. On the other hand, 401k, it's a lump sum of money invested, because you got to invest it in order to get some kind of return. You can't just leave it sitting in cash. The reality is, though, that means that it's more exposed to sort of fluctuations that you see front and center whenever you look at your account balance. For example, this year, and it's certainly getting a lot of people's attention based upon how poorly the market is performing. So here are the stats underscoring that generational change. In 1940, 58% of retirees had a defined benefit plan. As long ago as 1965, that number had dipped down to 5%. Now, pension, it's a defined benefit. It provides a reliable source of income. So there was sort of an incentive to retire at earlier ages versus today, where you don't have that incentive because you don't have that defined benefit plan. 401k, on the other hand, of course, fluctuates. So on average, what some of the studies have shown is that those with a defined contribution plan, 401k type of thing, tend to retire a year or two later on average, in terms of average age, than folks with a defined benefit type of plan. So again, that structural shift away from pension plans over to 401ks also is serving to push out that average retirement age. So the bottom line on that is okay, well, know that you're probably not going to get some kind of a pension or defined benefit plan. So it does come back to the 401k. And at the end of the day then it becomes, all right, well, I want to make sure that I am funding that at an early age. I want to make sure that I am certainly funding that as often as possible and consistently as possible, because how much is in that 401k is then going to determine a lot of what age you can retire. Because if there's more money in it, then okay, yeah, you can retire. If there's not, if you got to wait for the balance to continue to grow, then that's going to push that age out more. Remember, the max for 2023 actually increased pretty dramatically. The largest increase in that 401k limit, if you're over 50, which includes the catch-up, you can now put $30,000 away into a 401k, 403b, or 457. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about some of the factors that are driving retirement ages to be later than what they have been decades ago, here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. On the program, we're talking about some of the factors that are playing a role in this demographic shift, if you will, that's causing people to retire at later ages. Obviously, with life expectancy going up, you would typically expect that to happen. But interestingly, prior to the past 30 years, there was actually a shift the other way where people were retiring at earlier and earlier ages. Now that has reversed where people are retiring at later ages. And some of that has to do with some of the structural changes that have happened. We were talking about two of the biggest ones in the prior segment. Number one, Social Security changing from full retirement age of 65 all the way up to 67, right? So that 2 years, that's definitely a significant change that affects and impacts how people think about retirement. Similarly, the transition away from pension plans, where there was almost an incentive to retire as early as possible because that meant that you were going to get that guaranteed check as soon as possible, versus shifting over to 401ks, things like that. In the 1940s, the majority of Americans actually worked for an employer that provided a defined benefit plan. Today, that number is less than 5%. So pretty significant shift. Now more responsibility to fund things like 401ks, 403bs, 457s. Similarly, there's some other factors that are driving that trend. Next up on the list would be health insurance, because that becomes a big factor of trying to retire, particularly before the age of 65. 65 is when you are age eligible for Medicare. And while that certainly isn't free and isn't cheap if you're doing a supplement and Part B, the reality is, though, it is a considerable savings over trying to buy health insurance privately in those years leading up to age 65. So Medicare starting at age 65 becomes pretty important, because you certainly don't want a gap in coverage. And so it's important to kind of know that there is that age for Medicare at 65, and know that potential cost of what your health insurance could be should you want to try and retire at an earlier age. One of the best vehicles to sort of prepare potentially for that is a health savings account. And a health savings account is an account where you can use that for those medical expenses. And it's not something where if you don't use it all up in a year, it disappears. The balance in a health savings account does, in fact, carry forward going forward. And so then you can use it in later years. The reality is, though, that in order to have a health savings account, you have to have a high deductible insurance plan that is a specific type of health insurance plan that you have to have as that part in order to have that health savings account. So anyway, welcome into the program. This is Dollars and Cents with your host, Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning, talking a little bit about some of the factors that are impacting or extending out retirement ages for folks. And obviously, being healthier folks living longer. It's a simple, if you're living longer and your life expectancy for a male age 65 today has increased by almost 4 years since 1985. That's a significant increase in life expectancy. And there's a lot of studies that conclude that better health is strongly related to later retirement and vice versa. If you're working longer, you keep yourself mentally active, physically active, things like that, so that you can be healthy and be working. Certainly today, our jobs have a tendency to be less physically strenuous, more service and professional jobs in this economy than certainly there was 40 odd years ago, as those service and professional jobs certainly outpace the number of jobs that are in manufacturing. So most of the jobs and most of the work a little bit less physically strenuous. So obviously you want to stay healthy, and to a large extent working helps you stay healthy. So it's kind of like one of those things where one leads to the other, and they're constantly correlated, if you will. And then lastly is marriage. The reality is that women play a role in sort of delaying retirement because most couples prefer to retire at the same age. And wives, on average, statistically, are about 3 years younger than husbands. So then that means that the husband's got to work a little bit longer than their normal age, if you will, because if the wife is 3 years younger and they want to retire at the same time, then that's going to put the male roughly 3 years ahead or further past their normal age. So those are some of the factors that apply, and certainly as an increasing number of women working, and so you see that becoming a factor in why folks in general are retiring at later ages. So we thought it would be an interesting conversation for the program, sort of talking about those main factors and sort of some of the things that you can do to address them as well. Also, got another blog post up on the website, the most common regrets about retirement. We'll hit the highlights here in the last few minutes of this segment. We encourage folks to go to the website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com, and check out all of the full blog post that gets into a lot more details about some of the things that we'll hit here in the highlights. So one of the things that we talked about in the blog post is some of the biggest regrets that people have about retirement. The notion of wishing that you had planned earlier. We think there's 3 solutions to that. It starts with paying yourself first rather than last. Far too often people save money after they've spent all of their money for the month. If you pay yourself first, meaning that you are investing right out of the gate before you pay anything else, then that way you will ensure that you develop a good habit, number one, and then number two, make sure that you actually are investing some of your money or saving some of your money. Being consistent, being diversified, maintaining a budget, all of those kinds of things help folks to prepare better for retirement. Similarly, wishing that they had a plan for their income in retirement. I think far too often the financial services industry talks a lot about accumulate, save, but then they don't talk a whole lot about, okay, once I get there, what's the right strategy in terms of generating out income in retirement? And then lastly, a plan for your spare time, right? Those are the kinds of things that goes back to that the emotional and mental well-being that comes with having a purpose and a reason to get up in the morning. And certainly that's important to have that in retirement. Also in the blog post, talk a little bit about interest rates versus inflation, some of the investing fundamentals, and then we talk a little bit about our view on college loan forgiveness. If you caught the show a month or so ago, we've got a pretty strong opinion on that. Next week on the program, Rob and Christina will be hosting. The year starts to wind down, so Rob's going to be talking about some of the Social Security changes for next year, and then Christina will be talking about some of the tax changes for next year as well. So that's about all for this week's episode of Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice, or go to our website, Nelson Financial Planning, to schedule a free conversation for a review of your financial situation. Or you can just call the office, 407-629-6477. Have a great rest of your day.